be able to bring chunks of it into main memory to train our models. And if we are using something like Hadoop or Spark, we could send our code to our data, but then it will just make the process slower. So if the data is very huge and it couldn't be handled by a single machine, we'll do distributed training. Again, it's an advanced thing. So for now, we should make sure that if we are taking the data into our memory and if we have the code, we should be able to train it. And the last point is basically train, valid, and test splits. So what are these splits? So for example, if you have the data which is if you have 100 examples for a specific training, the first 80 examples, this is just an example, the major chunk will use for training, and then the other two, and from the remaining examples will validate our model, will test our model. So training is basically we'll use the data to train our machine learning model, to train our neural network, and then we'll use the validation test to test how well the model is doing on the data that it has not seen, how well the model is doing on the data that it has not been trained on. So it's a different, the number of the training examples are different, but they are from the similar distribution, like they are from the similar source. And the test split, you will keep changing the model according to the validation set, and once you have a model that you feel it works well on the train set as well as on the valid set, you will run it on the test split to do the final testing, showing that okay, on the test set, on the distribution that your model has not been trained, on the distribution on your model which on the split on which your model has not been trained, on the split on which your model has not been validated, this is the test split, and your model performs this well on the test split. So this you'll use in the final case. You won't change your model depending on that, you'll change it on the basis of validation set, and you'll train it on the train set. So once you are done with this, so these are like the basic prerequisites before going into it. Again, one more thing that I would add is basically bias and variance. Okay, so what's bias and variance? So basically you want your model to fit well to the data. You want it to learn stuff. You don't want it to you want it to learn from the training example. You don't want it to memorize your training examples. So when your model, when you give it less data, in some cases there are various things you can just search high variance, and when the model has high variance, it's when your model starts memorizing your data. So it will know that on a specific of a specific age with a specific family size, a person survives. It won't get the distribution that for these ages, for these many of these this family size, you have to output survival. It will start memorizing it, which is not good for us. So when we'll get an example which is different from the current example, it will fail. So you don't want high variance. And high bias is when your model doesn't learn a lot of stuff, so basically it doesn't learn it properly. So in a graphical sense, in a easier way to understand is it actually doesn't use all the features, and it starts giving wrong outputs for the train set itself. So it is not actually fitting to the train set itself. So obviously it won't perform well on the valids, and it won't perform well on the test set. So that's when you have high bias. And high variance is basically when you fit very good on the train set, and then on the valid set and the test set it's not performing very well. So that means your model's learning, it has started to memorize stuff instead of learning it. So a simple test is this only, that when you have trained your model, if you do very well on the train set but don't do good on valid set and test set, that's a case of high variance. And when you do very well, if you don't do well even on the train set, then it's high bias. And there are ways to reduce bias and variance when you want to. We'll see it after we train the models, but then this is a case that you should know even before starting your training your models. So what's a model? It is a mathematical function in some ways. In some types of models, it can be a categorical distribution, something like a tree, a decision tree, which tells you what happens when certain kinds of inputs are seen. So that's a different way of model. It could be a clustering model. Model is basically creating a function, creating a program that does what, that actually starts taking in data and gives you the output and gives you the prediction. It's a model. So there are various parts of model, or you can classify machine learning into various types. that can be basically supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. So supervised learning is when you know the classes well in advance, so you know that the class could be the classes, for example, you know that these are the people who have survived, these are the people who have not survived, and now you want to classify them. You know that these are the houses that were sold for $50, these were the houses that were sold for $100, and now you want to predict what is the specific, for how much the specific house will sell. If you do such kind of a problem, if you solve such kind of problem where you have the labels in hand, that's supervised learning. Now if you have a problem where you don't have the labels, so for example, when you have lots of people, you have their demographics, you know that these people live here, these people have this much salary, and now you just want to divide them into chunks. So a company wants to sell their products, wants to gain maximum profit, so it wants to divide the customer into segments, but then it's not telling, we know well in advance that this is the segment, this is a segment, this is a segment. It doesn't know the classes in advance. So when you do cluster stuff like clustering and anomaly detection, examples of it, that's unsupervised learning. You don't know the labels when in advance. When you fit the data to the model, it creates the classes, it creates the whatever the predictions are by itself. You don't tell it well in advance. Reinforcement learning is it's like dynamic programming. When the model tries something and it checks if it worked well, it will provide a reward and it will say that this is a okay thing to do, and now it will try a similar thing. So here you may have the label, but then what happens is uh, it doesn't train on everything. I mean, it doesn't train well in advance. It's a reward mechanism. So if it does well, you provide a reward to it, and when it gets a reward, it thinks that okay, I did well. And if it does something bad, you don't provide the reward, so it's like okay, this is not good. It's kind of predicting the actions involved. So it's like a kid who tries to start walking. So if it puts his feet in a different manner, he will fall, and if he puts it properly, he will be able to stand up. And then it will remember that this is, if I put my feet in this manner and if I put my hands in this manner, I'll be able to stand. That's a reward for it. Like you'll provide a chocolate to a student who solved his math problem properly to say that this is a good thing, so he'll got a reward, he'll keep doing it. That's reinforcement learning. So example of supervised learning are classification, regression. Classification is when you predict classes like survive, not survive. Regression is when you predict continuous variables. That's basically the cost of a house. Clustering is when you divide the population into different parts. So you segmented the population, your customers, you segmented into class 1, class 2, class 3, but then you have not provided the classes, it has itself taken it. Anomaly detection is basically when you uh, have lots of data and very less positive examples. So you have 99 cases when a computer security system did not fail, but then you only have 1% case where the customer, when the your security system actually failed. So that's an anomaly. So you want to break those anomalies. So this is not a classification problem in this sense, because although you have the labels, the positive classes are very less. So this becomes you can achieve this in an unsupervised manner when you'll provided a lot of non-positive examples, the negative examples, and tell it to generate its features tell it to generate the model by itself without seeing the labels. And then you will consider the anomalous examples, the positive examples, as outliers, and if it doesn't fit well in the data, it's an outlier. So that's a unsupervised learning. Reinforcement learning examples are teaching a robot to walk, teaching a robot to pick up things. OpenAI taught their robots to play games, different stuff to be done. And what we'll do in this course is basically we'll see a simple, like two simple examples of classification for simplicity to give an idea what machine learning is. We can later do a complete course on machine learning, it's that vast. So we'll cover only two algorithms, and yeah. Okay, so moving on to classification. Again, in the classification itself, it can be a subject in itself. It can be a binary or a multi-class classification. A binary classification is when you have only two classes, positive and negative. So the person survived or the person did not survive. Multi-class classification is when you have multiple classes. For example, for a picture that's shown to the computer, it could be a man, it could be a taxi, it could be a car, any car. I mean, it's not necessarily being a taxi, a private car. It could be an aeroplane. So it's a multi-class classification. There are multiple values to it. In multiple class classification, you can do one versus rest. That's basically a single model would predict. So there would be number of models, and each model would be able to predict itself from all others. So separate itself from all others. It's just a way of doing multi-class classification. Again, we won't cover that in the course, but then just to know that you will create n models for n classes, and each model would be able to select itself as positive and all the other classes as negative. So we convert a multi-class classification into a binary n binary classes, and the two class multi-class is basically a single model predicts the output. So those are complex models. Again, the examples of classification models are logistic regression. We'll see this. Naive Bayes is a probability-based model. Then decision tree is when you create decision trees. If this happens, we'll do this. If this is the input of a specific feature, we'll do this. If this is the input of a specific feature, we'll do that. It's like a tree, random forest, SVM, XGBoost. We can use neural networks for classification too. So there are various algorithms. This is not an exclusive list. So we'll start with the first model, logistic regression. This is one of the simplest model. It's very fast to train. Again, the training time depends on the number of features you include and the number of inputs that you include. But then this is one of the models that could work very fast. It's a simple line fitting algorithm. If we have learned, we have all learned line fitting in our maths classes. So basically, it just fits a line through the distribution. Yeah, so it's very simple in that case. It fits a curve. I mean, not exactly not always a line. When you increase the number of features, it becomes a curve. Not very important, but then yeah. So we might consider that for a specific example, we might think that let's not use logistic regression because there are too many features in it. Maybe it's not a very useful model. We'll use it for simple methods, but that's not the case. And when the number of dimension in database terms, when the number of columns increase, it is possible that logistic regression can find a single line that separates the data. If you don't understand that, ignore it for now. But then the key idea is you should not skip trying this model. It could if this works very well, then you'll save a lot of computations. You'll be able to do a lot more predictions in a specific time period. So you should always try logistic regression, naive Bayes before you go for complex stuff like SVMs, random forest, and maybe neural network. You should always try this. Yeah. So again, some basics of machine learning that we need to know before we start with a specific model. So basically, in our case, a specific example where a person died or maybe where a person survived. So we will have the features as x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, x6. Consider only x1, x2, x3 for here. This could be the fare that he paid. This could be the gender. This could be something like the number of siblings it has. So these are the features, and we have considered three features here for simplicity again. And this is a single training example. Why we included one, we'll see it later, but then there are three features right now. And again, so each feature, for each feature we have taken a parameter. Now what's a parameter? Parameter is basically showing the model that this is the this is the actual training thing. So when we train the model, these are the parameters that are tweaked, and we come down to a value that actually works well for our data. So theta 1, theta 2, theta 3, these are the three parameters, and usually we include a theta 0. That is basically the bias vector. It gives it helps you to get uh, it helps you when there's bias in your data. So if you consider a line, so if it cuts the y-axis at some point, that's your bias. That's your y-intercept. Analogous to y-intercept there, we have theta 0 here. And usually we multiply theta 0, we multiply the transpose of theta. We basically multiply these two vectors. And in math classes, again, we take the dot product in a way. So we have to transpose the first vector because we want our dimensions to be compatible. So we'll transpose theta and then we multiply it. So this is how you do a dot product. Again, it's not it's a math part, so if you can do the next 3 4 slides, it's fine. If you are not able to follow these, just keep up with it for now. We might do a math of machine learning, something of that sort, to understand this more deeper. I'm doing it for complexity. Again, I won't do all the math. I'll just barely touch it. Then it's important to get a sense to understand it. You should know the math for most models. So I'll just try to give like small intuition. Not necessarily everything would be covered. And if you don't understand some part, you can ask. If it's possible to answer, I'll answer. If it's very much deeper into maths, or if it's a very core thing that has been missed, we'll do it later on. Okay, so coming back to it, you have a simple training example. These are the parameters of your model. These parameters would be tweaked actually, and this is theta transpose x, which is basically the output of multiplying your doing a dot product on your dot product between your initialized parameters and your training features. So this part is logistic regression specific, and this is for any model that has any parameterized model like logistic regression, SVM, neural networks. It will have some parameters that you have to randomly initialize, or you'll use some kind of initializer. Again, that's itself a big topic. We'll just we'll just ignore it for now. We'll just consider that you can randomly initialize it. There are various distributions that you can use for initializing your parameters, and they do affect in your final output. We are just going ahead with it, not going deeper into it. So right now we are considering it to be randomly initialized, and this is the training example, and this stays the same between on training examples. So what happens is you'll first initialize your parameters with some random numbers, maybe 0 1 2 3 4 example, or 0 0.1 0 0.2 0 0.3 0.4 uh, or maybe 2.0 2.4 whatever, and then you'll show it a training example, and it will compute this or any cost function basically based on this or something. It will compute the output, basically predict the output using these parameters, and it will see what's the difference between the predicted output and what's the output the ground truth, what was the actual output that was to be predicted. So when you find, it will find a difference between them, and it will know that this by this much amount our predictions are different from the actual output, and then it will go back and edit these parameters to make up for the loss, make up for the wrong part, or make up for the difference that we had. We keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it until and unless we have a set of parameters in which we are able to predict properly, in which we are able to predict the right answers, or mostly it's near to right answers. We will go as high accuracy as possible. That's the whole point of doing machine learning, getting better parameters for a specific, for all the input examples. We'll keep changing our parameters, and in the end we'll have a set of parameters which will give us the proper information. Yeah. So this, if you would have taken some machine learning classes, this might look like a linear regression equation. Yeah, it's a linear regression example where you like regress outputs. So but for doing logistic regression, it is just a part of it. Remember this thing into it. Remember this part very, very nicely, this slide. I'll keep using these terms all the time. Okay. What's again, so we are seeing again, this is a math part, so if you don't understand, just ignore it for now. We'll sometime, if we get time, we can do a math class, or I'll show you the places where you can learn these things properly. So if you know math, good. If you don't know it, just bear with it. Yeah. So we have this function. This is a very important function. What it does is, any input you give it as an x variable, this x could be anything from minus infinity to plus infinity. It will make sure that your output stays between 0 and 1. So in a graphical sense, see, any input you give it from -6 to 6, these are the points we are showing. It can go till infinity. It will project it to the space where you will get only 0.0 to 1.0. So why it helps is basically, we are predicting the output as a binary case. So we want a person who has survived, that could be 1.0, and the person who has not survived, that's 0.0. We want to predict these things. but then we'll get the input in a continuous form. So we want to map it to 0.0 to 1.0. And why do we want to map it is because we want to predict the probability of a survival. We don't usually predict the survival directly. We'll just predict the how much probable is a person to survive, and probability lies between 0 to 1. Anything has a probability between 0 to 1. You can't go ahead of 1, or you can't go before 1 0. So this function, the sigmoid function, will map our output to a what do you say, to a probability distribution in a sense. So in our case, we had this theta transpose x. So we want this theta transpose x to be mapped to the probability space so that we know the probability of survival of an individual. So we'll take the theta transpose x, we'll pass it through the sigmoid function here, theta transpose x, and we'll get this thing, which is basically now mapped from 0 to 1. Theta transpose x had the range of -infinity to +infinity, -infinity to +infinity. We have now mapped it to 0 to 1, which is the probability. Okay. So what we'll do now is we have our inputs in that form, theta transpose x. For logistic regression, we have theta transpose x. We have converted it to h theta x. That's our hypothesis. Again, what's an hypothesis? We are just saying that this could be this. So in the first training example, we have initialized our random variables. We have initialized theta with some values. We multiplied it by x, and we gave the output. We passed it through a sigmoid function, which now maps it from 0 to 1. So we are saying that we are assuming that our model is assuming a specific probability of a person surviving and a apocalypse, an accident. So this is what we are predicting. This is our hypothesis. So on the next slide, I'm going deeper I'm going into probability now. So for a person surviving, we are seeing a certain person surviving has a h theta of x, a hypothesis, prediction. We are assuming it. Yeah, we are assuming h theta x to be the probability of a person surviving. So in probability, we know that sum of all probabilities is always equal to 1, and we are assuming that h theta x is the probability of a person surviving, and it is between 0 and 1. That sigmoid function makes sure that h theta x is always between 0 and 1. So when we are here, we know that h theta x is between 0 and 1, and we are assuming that h theta x is the probability of a person surviving. So now we know that the probability of a person not surviving should be 1 minus h theta of x. It's the basic rule of probability. The sum of all probabilities is always equal to 1. The only two favorable cases that we have is a person surviving and a person not surviving. So the addition of it should be equal to 1. So this is with the set of parameters theta and the input x, the probability of a person surviving. Okay. So now we will go, we'll write it in a different manner. What we have done here is we have taken the h theta x from here. Here we have put it here, and we have put yi, we have put 1 minus yy, and we have multiplied it. So what exactly this is? So we have converted these two equations, and we have put it into a single equations and called it likelihood. So this is the likelihood of our problem. So we'll use this equation a lot, and because this is probability, so we need to multiply it. This pi is analogous to your summation symbol sigma. Your summation is basically, it will be somewhere over here. Okay, so this is a summation. We are very much accustomed to using this. So when summation comes, we know that all the from I equals to 1 to m will add stuff. When we have pi, we know that from I equals to 1 to m will multiply things. So this I is basically showing you the training examples. So for all the training examples, you will do multiplication of this entire thing again and again and again and again, and we'll get the likelihood. Why we have written theta over here? Because we know that the likelihood depends on the theta. Okay, so we predicted, and now what are these yi and 1 minus yi? This is just a fancy way of showing that when the input is 1, we are concerned with the probability of a person surviving. And so what happens is when the input is 1, y is equal yi, it would be equal to 1, and this value would be useful. and 1 minus 1 would be 0, and anything raised to 0 would be equal to 1. So this entire term would become 1, and multiplication 1 doesn't have a use, so it will just go away. This term would disappear in places where the y equals to 1 when the person is surviving, and when the person is not surviving, we'll have y equals to 0. So this would be 0, and anything raised to 0 is always 1, so this term will go away, but this term will stay, and 1 minus yi would be 1 minus 0, that will be equal to 1, and 1 minus h theta x is the probability of a person not surviving. So you'll keep on multiply these things. So to find the final probability from the entire training set, the likelihood of a person surviving, will multiply all the training examples and we'll get L of theta. That's the likelihood in terms of probabilities. So in the next step, what we are doing is we are taking log on both the sides. Why are we taking log? Because it's usually better to convert your multiplication problem into addition. Multiplication is n times of addition, so it just makes it a lot more easier. So for solving our problem, so when we take log into this, when you take a log on this part, your yi would come here, because that's a basic log theorem. So a raised to b becomes b log a when you apply log, and in the same case a raised to b becomes b log a. That's happening here and here, and because we have taken a log, this multiplication becomes summation. So again, when you take a log, it's again a rule that log of a into b becomes log a plus log b. So log of this part became log of this plus log of this over here. It became log of this part plus log of this part, and then the final product, this was the final product that we have. This part again, this also get converted, this multiplication also got converted to a summation. So if we, this is from bottom up again, when we see from top to bottom, we applied log to this entire thing. So what happened was this product term converted into log, and we got a log of this, we got a log of uh, this term m times added m times. So when you apply log to this part, we'll get log of first example plus log of second training example plus log of third training example. So we have now a log with this entire term. When this log was applied to this part, again this is multiplication, so it became log of this part plus log of this part, and again it was a raised to b, so it became b log a. It's not clear, we could write it down and do it better in a extra session. I should have written it, but then okay, this should help again. Could write it again sometime. I'll just yeah. So log of a plus log of b become log of ab becomes log of a plus log b, and log of a raised to b is b log of a. These are the only two identities that we are using to convert this into this. Applying log to the multiplication, which converts this into a summation, then applying log to the internal part, which converts this product into this summation, then applying log internally on these things, which converts it into yi log of h of xi, converts the exponential term into a multiplication term. So now we have a log likelihood. We'll call this log likelihood. Once we have this, we have an addition of this term. Again, it's math, so I'm assuming that most of the people who have will be able to understand it. But then if it's not clear, we could just go ahead with it. it's not very much important for the coding part. So it's not like if you don't understand this, you won't be able to code, like see the next part. But then it's good if you don't understand it, you should always go. I'll share some resources to understand this in a much better way later on. Yeah. So now we have the log likelihood. This is the likelihood of a person surviving uh, of a person surviving in an accident. So now what you want to do is you want to change your theta. You want to change this parameter that we had assumed initially. Here we had assumed randomly initialize these parameters. Now you want to change it according to the input. But how do you do it? You just have this likelihood. So this is again math. So we'll use an algorithm called as gradient ascent in this case, where you will convert your input. Sorry, on each training example, you will find the difference between it and the final, and the in the initial will find the difference between the predicted value and the value that we had as the ground truth, the actual value. So actual value with the predicted value, we find the difference and we update the theta. How we do it is actually the using the algorithm called gradient descent. Again, there are various algorithms which are called basically optimizers. So there's gradient ascent, gradient descent, there's Adam optimizer, there's stochastic gradient descent. So we'll just see gradient ascent for now. So we had basically assumed theta. Now we want to make tiny changes into theta to maximize the log likelihood. So this is the likelihood of a person surviving, and we want to maximize it because we want our model to perform well on our data. So we want to maximize the log likelihood, and we use gradient ascent for it. How we do it again? So this is much more deeper into the math. So this thing here is actually gradient. So when you find derivative of a matrix, it's the gradient, and we are doing it in terms of theta on the log likelihood, and we multiply it by a learning rate, and then we change the theta. So what's learning rate? Again, this is a parameter that you define and you change depending upon the output of your model. If your model is not performing well, you change theta, you change learning rate so that it performs well. This is the gradient, and this is the log likelihood. So how do you know by what value do you want to change your parameter? So basically you take the derivative of the log likelihood that tells you how much of theta that you need to change. And for finding the derivative by when you find the derivative of this term, you get this. I'm just avoiding the proof of this part, but for now just remember that when you take the derivative of this term, you get this. We'll do some extra session to prove this, but then for now, this term is the derivative. This equation is the derivative of the log likelihood. Once you have found the derivative of the log likelihood, you need to change your theta according to the gradient. Gradient is basically the derivative in terms of vectors. So this is going. I've changed the, that was in terms of vectors. Now this is in terms of a single parameter theta. For a single parameter theta, you want to add something to the theta to change it, and what you are adding is this. You're just adding the derivative of the log likelihood to your theta, and you get the new theta. And once you have done this, your parameters have been updated depending upon the output of your model, and you are multiplying your thing with alpha. So what alpha does is basically when you multiply it by alpha, you will end up changing the value of theta in numerical terms. So when you make very big changes, so alpha bit control is basic values of alpha could be 0.001, 0.00001, which controls how much you are changing theta. This again helps in showing and changing how well your model performs. So this was a basic example of logistic regression. The equations in the next meeting, we'll basically see how to implement it in Python. It's much simpler to implement. The meeting will end. So finally, after seeing how logistic regression actually works, we still missed the part where you actually find the derivative and how we find the derivative of this log likelihood function. We just ignored it. We just didn't do it for now because it will take a lot more time and we want to do stuff that actually you implement. So I will share some resources later to understand in a better way, and we might do as well in some extra sessions on it. But for now, what we'll do is we'll just quickly implement it. This was the final data frame that we had, and again, all of these features are not directly useful. So what we'll do is we'll just create a small data frame. The X part is basically the input features. X is the input into your model. So what we'll do is we'll just take the things from train that are useful to us for training part, and those features are we will pass a list of we'll pass a list that tells us what are the features that we want. So what we need is we need p class, we'll need sex, we'll need age, we'll need no, we won't use that because we have used a we have a different feature family size that we build using SIB, and parse. So this might be useful, and these two features may or may not be useful. But for simplicity, we are not including them in our final model. We are just including the family size. So we'll take the family size. We'll also take the we also converted age to category, so we'll use age category instead of age. What else do we have? We have p class. We have fair too. We'll use the fair variable, and we'll also use embarked. So we are using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 features in our final training set. This is the training set. This is the training set consisting of all the train, test, and valid splits. This is the X. This is the train part. Okay. Even before we divide it into even before we divide it into X and Y, the input and output, what we have to do is we have to randomize these data sets. So there could be some inherent trend in these inputs. So in time series and in some problems over the period, the trends change, but then we want to learn the actual input. We don't want any different kind of distribution issues with the data. So what we'll do is we'll just randomize it. Again, we'll use pandas for randomizing, and we'll call so this is a very handy function to randomize your data. So when we randomize, we see that these indexes, these labels in a normal when it started with 0, it was ending with 890, but then this is randomized now. So after we have randomized it, what we do is we have to reset this index. So we'll call reset index on it. We also want to remove the initial indexes, so we'll just drop them. We're telling that drop the initial indexes and generate new indexes. That's basically reset. So when we do this, we have 0 to 890 here. And again, this is not in place. It's creating a new data frame, so we need to assign it to our original variable. So yeah, we have done this now. We've randomized the data. I have myself experienced things when you not randomize the data and you get a specific accuracy, and after you randomize it, you sometimes get better accuracy, but then better in the sense a higher value. But it's not always that a higher value is better. You need your model should be able to understand the entire data and give the output. So basically, it's always recommended to randomize your data unless it's something like time series and you are using a specific algorithm which needs your data to be in a specific series. In that case only you won't randomize it. Until that case, you'll just keep randomizing it. So after we have randomized it, and we'll collect all the inputs into a specific variable, that's X. So what happened? Okay, we didn't put a comma here, so I consider it as a which each category in index. Why don't we have it? Okay. Maybe there was some capitalization issue. Okay. Well, these three six variables that will input it to our model, and what we need as an output is this. This column is our output. Survived. We have our x, which is this small column, the small data frame, and we have y, which is this small series. Now we'll use sklearn, machine learning library in Python, one of the most used libraries for machine learning. So it has implementation of all the major algorithms, most of them, and in most cases, these are the best implementations. There are some places, there are some algorithms like XGBoost and all, which in which it's better to use the different libraries, but in most cases, this is a good library to use. So we'll just import sklearn dot linear model. So it gives you the IntelliSense and import linear regression. Logistic regression. Sorry. So this simple function or this simple implementation actually does all the math that we had seen here. All these things are done by it. I mean, done by sklearn, and you don't need to implement any of these. All you have to do is import logistic regression, and when we call help on it, we can see the various inputs that we have, the various parameters that we can pass into this function. So basically, you can give it the max iterations, the number of time you want to iterate onto your inputs. So if you have 100 examples, and you check each example 100 times, you get something like 10,000 times. So this is basically the number of times you want to go through the entire data set. I mean, to the all the examples. If you don't set it, it's 100, the auto one. Then we are telling it n jobs equals to none. So when you want it to run parallelly, you will set it something like 2 3 4 according to the number of cores you have. And what else is important here? So c equals to 1.0, that this is how you control the regularization. We'll come back to it later on. And yeah, so this is what we have in our case. So we'll do a quick training on that. First we'll create an instance of this class. So we created an instance of this logistic regression class as logistic regression. And now what we will do is this simple object that we have created of this class, we can pass in our data to it, and we can tell it to basically train a logistic regression model on our data. So we'll just call logistic regression dot fit, and we'll pass in our x and y to it. So what this is basically, I'm using only the first 600 examples out of 899 examples for training my model. So this is for converting your, like, making the train test split. So I'm not doing like creating different variables. I am doing runtime indexing to like keep the stuff like in a single column, in a single cell. So I'm just not creating the splits. So for this is basically the train split that I'll just create them. So your first 600 examples are your X train, and Y-train is basically the first 600 examples of. Yeah, these are your train sets, and your validation sets will be from 600. You'll take all of them. Okay, so this is like a wildcard. So when you don't put anything here or here, if you don't put anything on the left side, it takes from 0, and if you don't put anything on the right hand side, it continues till the end of the list, till the end of the data frame. So I've created the test and train and validation splits, and now what you'll do is you'll just call the X-train here and Y-train here. Okay, and I'm calling it to train it. So in this simple dot fit command, in a couple of seconds, it did all of these. It generate, like, it did these, all these stuff. It, yeah, here it assumed parameters. It did this multiplication log product. It passed it through a sigmoid, and it calculated the log likelihood, and then it calculated how much your theta should be changed, the parameter to be changed, and then it changed the parameters and did this entire story again for each training example, and it did it for 100 times. So basically we had a 600 examples, we had passed in 600 examples, and it did 100 times, like it passed all the 600 examples through the model 100 times in a couple of seconds, and we didn't have to do anything. So this is the simple stuff that I was saying. And we have a trained model now, and what we can do is we now want to check how well it has trained. So we have not passed in any parameters to it. These are the hyper parameters that you can keep tweaking to change your model accuracy. So now what we'll do is we have trained the model. We just need to see how well it performs. So again, we'll use sklearn methods to check how well our model is performing. I'll go to the sklearn metrics and I'll import some things, and these are basically accuracy score, and we want to get a classification report. We'll just keep with the accuracy score for now. Okay, so we have imported the accuracy score from the module sklearn.metric. Okay, it's S, I think. Yeah, it's sklearn.metric. So now we want to get the accuracy score for this model on our predicted example. So we had our predictions in Y, the validation predictions in Y underscore valid, and we had our input for the training examples in X valid. Now we'll just do a model.predict. So we had created this logistic regression model. We'll just call a predict function on it. Okay, so for doing this, we get the predictions. X valid is not defined. Why is it not defined against X valid? So this small vector is actually predicting the survivals of the other 291 examples that we had kept in the validation set. This is 101010. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You won't actually see, it's not feasible to check each example manually. So we had important accuracy score here, so we can directly use the accuracy score. We'll just take the accuracy score between the ground truth, that is basically Y val. Here we have Y val, and with it we are also passing it the things that we have predicted here. And when you do that, it will give you the accuracy. So our model is performing 80% accurately on our test set. Now we want to do the same thing for our training set. just to know how well it's performing on the training set. Use the exchange here. So our model is performing 79% accurately on our training set. So it's these two values are very near. So our model is not having high bias or high variance. So it's a good model. So after this, we would want to deploy our model. So we have trained a model using logistic regression. We want to deploy it. So we have a separate chapter on deploying the model. But then before that, we'll see another model, which is decision trees. So see how easy was this to implement a complicated model. I mean, the math was so complicated here, but then sklearn was able to help us out in this part. Yeah, it's much more easier to implement it than understanding it. Okay, so one more thing, we didn't pass on any parameters here. Yeah, we didn't pass on any parameters while creating this logic regression object out of the class. So we can pass all of these. So if you want to improve your accuracy, or if you're facing high bias, high variance, you will have to change these parameters like C and penalty to C and all to like change your model a bit to find the best set of parameters uh, to that like predicts well on your model. So why you need to understand the math is basically to know which set of parameters you have to use. So you will have to change penalties, and you'll have to change max iterations depending upon the understanding of your model. You will be able to make quick guesses instead of doing a complete brute force approach of checking all the parameters. And these parameters, like we have just 891 examples in our training set. When this size increases, it gets very difficult to like it's not feasible to try all sort of parameters. So for making that intuition that which set of parameters, which set of parameters work well for your model, you need to get a good understanding of the model. The best would be to learn the math. If not the math, at least you should like create some sort of table in your mind that this is the change of parameter that I would do when this is the kind of issue that I'm facing. That is why you need to understand the model math. That's all. And yeah, for any model. And logic regression is the simplest, but I'm saying this works really well in a lot of cases. So it's very much important that you do logic regression or naive Bayes. That's another very simple model. You should do try these models before going for different difficult ones. Okay, coming back to the slides. And we have another model. So initially I said about bias and variance. What's bias? Bias is when your model is not learning, fitting well to the training data itself. Your training accuracy is also low. Your test and validation accuracies are also low. Specifically, your validation accuracy is very low. Your test accuracy is also low. And this means your model is not training well. So now we need to make up for it. So what can you do for increasing your like reducing your bias so that it performs well on your training data is you reduce regularization. Regularization is a way of change of your model, of how much difference a specific training examples makes to your parameters. So when you increase regularization, you reduce the effect of your changes that your gradient ascent takes here. It actually changes the effect of a specific training example on the parameters. So this thing, when you add to your parameters, it changes the parameter a bit, but how much this is changing on each parameter, you can control it by adding a regularization term. That is how it affects it. So when you increase regularization, when you decrease regularization, you come out of high bias. That's you reduce the bias, and your model performs well on your training set as well as your validation set. But when you reduce it a lot, so or if you don't use regularization, it might be a case of high variance. Now variance is when your model starts learning your training examples. So instead of making those small nudges, it actually makes drastic changes in your parameters, and it's actually trying to get a set of parameters that works very well for the training set. But then for the validation set, which it has not seen, it performs very poorly. So when this happens, you want to increase your regularization, and when you keep on increasing your regularization, your bias might increase. So as you can see, it's like trade-off between high bias and high variance. So when you try to reduce bias, your variance might increase. When you try to reduce variance, or bias might increase. So by changing the model parameters here and other things like changing the number of training examples, changing the model split, or changing various model specific parameters, you want to find a sweet spot which has low bias as well as low variance, so your model performs well on the training set as well as on the validation set, and the overall accuracy is high. And again, accuracy is not a single measure of checking your model performance. There are various other things like F1 score, precision recall. You might have checked it somewhere that those are like true positive upon true positive plus false positive, things like that. Again, it will like will go away from the actual content, so we're just reducing it. And these things like the different machine learning models, the math of it you can easily find. We want to go more on the practical side of how to actually plug in a machine learning part into our data science pipeline. That's the actual motto, the aim of the course. So we won't go much deeper into the machine learning.